If you'd ask most Broncos fans around Thanksgiving about Sean Payton and streaks, they'd be pretty pumped up because he broke the streak of consecutive losses to the Kansas City Chiefs. He broke the streak of how many times it had been since we had won in Buffalo. He broke the streak of how long it had been since we'd lost road divisional games. But tonight and really right now, there are two streaks that continued and permeate and are daggers to all Broncos fans' heart, and that is we just lost our 8th game in a row to the Las Vegas Raiders. We have never actually beat the Vegas Raiders. We beat the Oakland Raiders or the Los Angeles Raiders, but we've never actually beat them since they've been in Las Vegas. That's disheartening, but probably more disheartening than that is we now go on to our 7th losing season and playoff-less season. But I am a glass half full kind of Broncos fan. I feel like what's the point of being a fan if that's not going to be the case? And so I see hope in this offseason, and there's a whole offseason to break down. Draft picks, I hope we happen, and just a lot to break down. But I really want to go through kind of this game in particular and what our thoughts were as we break down this post game. And there's going to be plenty of time as the offseason goes to really do a review of the year. But it really has been an absolute roller coaster to start 1-5 and then feel like the season's over, and to see all those surfacing quotes of Sean Payton talking about tanking for Caleb Williams and how the NFL was going to have to change the rules when he was a Fox analyst because Caleb Williams is such a generational talent. And so when we were 1-5, you thought for sure, because of like not only being 1-5, but some of the teams we lost to, you're like, how do we lose to the Raiders at home? How do we lose to Washington at home? You thought the season was over then and we were tanking for Williams. And then hope comes back so strong. This team didn't give up. The defense was different. It felt like we had the right guys on board, and we won 5 straight. And then I think probably the most disappointing loss was the Patriots loss at home on Christmas Eve, especially all the reports that came out, the way things broke today, that had we actually won that game against the Patriots and then won this game against the Raiders, we'd be in the playoffs. So those things are definitely disappointing. But I think there's definitely good news as well in this. It's absolutely a dagger and disappointing that we wake up tomorrow and there's not meaningful football again until September. That feels like a long time till we'll see our orange and blue out there mattering again. But it is important to know that we did jump the Vegas Raiders because of the tiebreaker, which not only is going to help us next year as they give out the strength of schedule. We'll have the 3rd toughest schedule in the AFC West instead of the 2nd. So Kansas City's going to have the hardest schedule. Then it's going to have the Raiders. Then it'll be us. And then the San Diego Chargers, or I guess the Los Angeles Chargers, will have the 3rd hardest schedule. So that's good. And if we look at the draft order, which is really going to be talked about a ton over the coming weeks and months up until April, we're now sitting at 12. Now, if you look ahead of us, there are a lot of teams who are quarterback hungry ahead of us. Yet there's also free agent quarterbacks on the board, and Fields, and what's going to happen with Fields? What's going to happen? Did people believe in Will Levis? What's going to happen? Is Aaron Rodgers back? What's going to happen with Kirk Cousins? So there are a lot of pieces to move. I think there's a ton of talent at overall number 12. And I think I trust Sean Payton. The big news of the day before the game was that George Payton, our GM, is back next year. And I did a video on it just yesterday, and I was hoping that was the case. I did not want Sean Payton to hire his boy, Mickey Loomis, to come in. He's 68 years old, whereas George Payton has a real good, he's on social media and he's like more plugged into current players. And he's much, much better at evaluating the draft. And so I trust him as a draft evaluator. And you just heard tonight on the telecast, as bad as it was, you heard tonight how much they loved a lot of the guys who George Payton drafted. Like one of the commentators could not get over how much he loved our Quinn Meinerz, and talking about how they called him the gut and he loves that name. And he said that same story like 20 times. And that was a 3rd round pick. And he gushed about Barrett Browning, another 3rd round pick. He gushed about Jonathan Cooper, a 7th round pick. So I feel like the fact is we have a bunch of draft capital. and that's exciting to be on front. All the Russell Wilson picks are done now, and so we can actually pick, and we own all of our picks except for our second rounder, because of that was in the Sean Payton trade. So we are going to. There's a lot of ways we can actually get that back. If you look at how Jerry Jeudy flashed today, might he be on the trade block, and we could pick up some draft capital for him? That could be very interesting. So I want to look quickly here at just the box score from today's game, and I had it in a tab and it's gone. But looking here at the box score and how did Jarrett Stidham play? So he had 272 yards, which is much greater than Russell Wilson's 204-yard average. You could argue that a lot of those yards came in garbage time when we were already down 2 scores and dump offs to Pirine, but at the same time, Russell Wilson had a lot of those garbage time yards as well. So I don't believe that Jarrett Stidham is our quarterback of the future, but I wonder, Broncos country, if the NFL is moving more towards surrounding a quarterback on a rookie deal with talent and hoping that they can perform. I just look at how Joe Flacco's playing, how Baker Mayfield's playing, how Brock Purdy is playing. Like, all of those players are playing well, not because they're elite elevators, but because they're on manageable deals and the team can surround them with talent. And so sure, you're going to have your guys like a Lamar Jackson and a Pat Mahomes who are amazing, but at the same time, even those guys on those massive deals, when their talent drops off, they drop off. Like, Mahomes doesn't look the same this year now that he's on his max deal and they have to surround talent around him. So I just wonder if that might be the future of the quarterback position. I remember when I first started watching football, like the Terrell Davis era, it was all about like getting a great running back, and running backs would go early in the draft and you'd pay your running back tons and tons of money. And now we're at an era where if you pick a running back in the first round, you're like, dude, these guys fall off turnip trucks. We got Jaleel McLaughlin as an undrafted free agent. He walked off the street and he's amazing explosive player for us. So the NFL changed in how it valued the running back position. And I see the same thing maybe happening with quarterback in that it's more about what talent can you have around them. And you might have 1 or 2 outliers like a Christian McCaffrey who breaks that mold, who obviously, if you could get Christian McCaffrey with the overall number 1 pick, you should do it because he's a game changer. But if it's not a Christian McCaffrey, sign him as an undrafted free agent like we did Jaleel McLaughlin. So all that to say, that's very interesting. Jarrett Stidham, I was impressed with how he played. He was gutsy. He was not the quarterback of the future, but I also don't think this loss was on him. I also don't think our other 7 or other 8 losses were on Russell Wilson. I just think the main issue was we paid Russell Wilson like he was Lamar Jackson, like he was Pat Mahomes, and instead he can be the type of player who is like a Brock Purdy. And if he has talent around him, he can be good. He needs more talent around him, and you can't afford to put talent around him and pay him that max deal. And that really is the crux of the issue. I am disappointed. This is a disappointing way to enter the offseason, but I also know that hope springs eternal and that Broncos country, we're gonna be back. And I think Sean Payton is gonna get back to his winning ways next year. We have the right owner. We have the richest owner in sports, and you don't ever bet against Walmart money. Like, they find a way to come out on top, and you see Amazon like, oh, Amazon's going to put Walmart under, and somehow they just keep rising to the top. And I feel like that's going to happen with these Denver Broncos, and you're not going to want to bail on them. You don't want to be the person who bails on these Broncos and says you stopped watching and you gave up, because they will be back, and you want to be able to say that you were there for it. And I know you will be, and I will be. So thank you so much. This has been an absolute amazing, skyrocketing year for me. My first time ever doing YouTube content. I've loved hanging with you guys every day and plan to do it all through the offseason, all through until this time next year when the Denver Broncos are making the playoffs and we're all buckled up, Broncos country.